First, I want to thank our witnesses for appearing here today. In the past 100 years, Americans and our government have spent large amounts of time and effort worrying about our access to fossil fuels. We have researched, developed, and invested in new ways to access the energy that exists under the feet of my constituents. And we have produced natural gas and oil that is a vital component to America's energy security. In the 21st century, access to critical materials is going to be as important as traditional fossil fuels. I'm going to repeat that. Our access to critical materials is going to be as important as fossil fuels. These materials touch every congressional district and every single American. They are in everything from the grid that we rely on and the electric vehicles that people drive to the computers, electronics, and cell phones that each of us have access to. The mining and processing of critical materials has large economic potential for America. One of the oldest companies in my district, for example, is McClanahan Corporation, which manufactures equipment for crushing, cleaning, and sorting of raw materials. The family-sustaining jobs that McClanahan's provides are the lifeblood for my community. We should not look at critical materials only through an economic lens. China's goal to dominate the mining and the processing of critical materials has created one of the largest current national security risks to America. In 1973, when OPEC started its oil embargo against the United States, the cartel's global oil market share was just slightly over 50%. This sent through the American economy shockwaves. Today, China controls 90% of critical material processing. Again, 90% of global critical mining processing is done in China. If China were to halt exports of critical materials into the U.S., it would cripple our economy overnight. At the highest levels of government, we need to be addressing this threat to our nation and planning to ensure that it does not come to pass. Sadly, the Biden administration's policies are pushing us further into dependency on China. Policies like EV mandates and forced power plant closures increase American demand for critical materials. Meanwhile, draconian environmental and permitting processes prevent domestic processing from occurring. We need to stop these ill-conceived efforts and put American ingenuity to the task for restarting our domestic industry and breaking China's grip on critical materials. Mr. Stratt, how do these delays impact financing for these projects that you would recommend be done to bring greater predictability to the permitting process?
It's a problem because, as Mr. Vincent alluded to, mineral exploration and development takes years and significant sums of money. And so if an application gets hung up, investors become concerned about they become unwilling to invest the capital needed to move that project along. And as was mentioned earlier, there are projects that have invested hundreds of millions of dollars and gone through 10 or more years of permitting only to end up with nothing.
Dr. Michio Foss, you have traveled extensively throughout Asia. How far behind are we to China in sectors of critical mineral mining and processing?
We're really far behind. They were investing and building capacity while we were basically dismantling ours.
Mr. Stratt, is it fair to say that permitting is one of, if not the largest obstacle to companies trying to start mining and processing operations here in the U.S.?
I agree it is.
Do you believe that permitting process is being weaponized to keep domestic mining and processing activities from occurring? And in other words, are efforts to delay permits another way to politely stop a project without discussing its merits?
I can't say for certain that anything is being weaponized, and I once heard a judge tell someone that if you don't know for certain, don't say so. I can't speculate on that, but I will say that the permitting system needs to be reformed.
Mr. Vincent, critics of permitting reform often claim that permitting reform is just another way to weaken our nation's environmental standards. Can you discuss the new technology that your industry has developed to allow us to protect the environment?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. which is somewhat insulting. I don't like anybody saying that we're trying to skirt environmental regulation by asking for more certainty in our permitting. I mean, I already said in both my written and verbal statements that we don't have a problem with the regulations for the most part. It's the uncertainty that comes in through the permitting process. Good example, and it's tied to litigation, which Mr. Strapp might want to weigh in on as well. The 14 years that Samfire Resources America has endured in finally getting a permit, I would say roughly half of that is in litigation by environmental groups that know how to use that permitting process and the litigative nature of statutes of limitations to drag these out. A mine already costs enough to do it right. With adding in that certainty on when and if you're going to be litigated, just adds to that uncertainty.
I thank all of the witnesses for participating here today. My time has expired. I now yield to the gentlelady from Colorado, Ms. DeGette, for her 5 minutes.
Thank you.